General Motors off the hook tonight for an estimated $10 billion in damages related to its defective ignition switch. Now, that defect is blamed for the deaths of at least 200 people and resulted in the recall of millions of GM cars and trucks. A judge upheld a legal shield protecting the new GM from claims that started before its 2009 bankruptcy. With us now, Bob Hilliarda, the best-known attorney in the country representing GM victims, and Laura Christian, whose daughter's death in 2005 was the first linked to the ignition defect. All right, Bob, I'm going to start with you. So what does this decision mean for folks who had crashes in cars before the 2009 GM bankruptcy?
Hey, Gerri, good to see you. It means that they are forever locked out of the courthouse. The door is shut and locked. What this judge did was he recognized that they had been deprived of their Fifth Amendment due process rights. He recognized that GM had actual knowledge through 24 GM upper management and attorneys before the bankruptcy. They had actual knowledge of the defect, and they had actual knowledge that those who drove those cars would die or be injured.
Well, that's the point, isn't it, that GM had knowledge of these problems before the bankruptcy, yet they did not talk about them publicly. So it seems to me that one GM is all GMs. GM is the same. It has the same employees. It has the same headquarters. It works in the same place. Mary Barra is a legacy. She is the CEO today. Her dad worked for GM. How is this a different company?
It's not. And you hit it right on the head. What happens now is GM says, look, yeah, we did it. Yeah, we're responsible, but that was when we were called old GM. So you can blame us, but you can only blame us when we were wearing our old GM hat.
All right.
And now, because there's a bankruptcy, we have on our new GM hat, and it is our fault, but it's our fault when we were the old GM, and so we are not responsible.
It goes away with the bankruptcy, is the view.
Right.
And tell me quickly, how many people do you think are in that old GM bucket that might have brought cases, that might have brought actions, who got hurt?
Well, we know that there were about 130 cases filed into bankruptcy, including 20 deaths that were waiting for the decision, and probably hundreds more. You know, I heard from one of those clients yesterday, Gerri, who lost his pregnant wife, and he just couldn't understand it. He knows what bankruptcy is supposed to do, but he said, look, they committed fraud, and my wife died, and now I have no right to sue them.
All right, I want to bring in Laura Christian here. Your daughter, you were the birth mother of a young woman, Amber Marie Rose, who died in one of these cars. Tell us your story.
Oh, Gerri, and it was July 29th of 2005, and my daughter was driving. It was late at night. The car went into the accessory position, which meant that, as we know, the power steering did not work, the power brakes were off, and it meant that the airbag would never deploy. Unfortunately, that night she died, but for the airbags, she would have lived. If those airbags had deployed, she would have lived.
And here we are years and years later, and you know, Bob, what's amazing to me is my assumption is that for years and years, parents and families have assumed that their loved ones who were injured or hurt or even killed in some of these crashes, that it was their fault. Mm-hmm. And there were a phalanx, an army of GM attorneys to say just that. So they've been blaming themselves for all these years, and now, what should they think?
Yeah, that's right. They not only were they led to believe it was their fault or their loved one's fault. A lot of time, like Laura, who I represent, a lot of times they were directly told that the driver of the vehicle will be attacked because of their negligence. You know, I have cases where GM aggressively went after the drivers and said, this car is not defective, this is a negligent young driver who's at fault. And keep in mind, Gerri, and it's amazing to me that they were saying that while they actually knew, all the way up the food chain, that it was false, that this car was defective. And they kept getting notice after notice of accidents, injuries, and deaths, and they kept riding that same horse, blaming the driver, telling the parents, the car is fine, it's not our fault.
Laura, isn't there something of a double insult here? I mean, first of all, you have the defective ignition switch, then you have the bailout, and now these companies can take a big tax deduction on what they're paying for these settlements.
It's disgusting. I mean, it truly is disgusting. How is it that our children or our loved ones can be some sort of a write-off from earnings? Yeah, that's just, it may be legally okay, but it's not morally okay. And I've spoken with a lot of families that have heard this recent ruling, and you know, the word that comes to mind to so many of them is sickening. You know, that they're never going to get justice. This was their only chance.
Bob and Laura, thank you so much for being on the show tonight and describing your reaction to this news. Thank you so much.
Good seeing you, Gerri.
Good to see you. And now we want to know what you think. Here's our question tonight. Should GM be shielded from its responsibility by bankruptcy? Log on to GerriWillis.com and vote. I'll share the results at the end of tonight's show.